Hi, welcome to Cauldron Her Daddy, a podcast about sex, astrology, magic, and whatever else Meredith and I want to talk about. I'm Sarai Johnson, a somatic sexologist and a witch.
And I am Meredith Holley, an astrologer, human design reader, and witch. And today we're going to talk about sexology. Why do you need sexology? What is it? And I don't know a ton about sexology, so I'm going to ask Sarai all of my newbie questions, and she's going to share what she knows with us. And so I guess my first question is, how would someone know if sexology is right for them? What makes it the right modality for somebody?
Yeah, great question. So glad you asked. Okay, so sexology is basically, as you might guess from the word, the study of sex, you see. And there are clinical sexologists, which I am not one. Clinical sexologists do more like hands-on kind of clinical type work. They might end up in education or in other fields around human sexuality, even places like physical therapy and pelvic floor therapy and things like that. There's also sexological bodywork, which isn't legal in any state except California. And so that is more hands-on, actual like kind of touching work that helps people with physical sensation, and I think a legitimate practice, but not something that I offer because I live in Oregon where it is not legal to do. And so I practice somatic sexology, and that is essentially the somatic part is the body. And the idea of how somatic sexology works is that it takes into account the study of human sexuality, the body and the experience that we have in the body, and the nervous system and regulation of the nervous system to bring all of those pieces together. And that, I think, together helps create a healthy approach to an experience of sex and pleasure. I also talk about it and believe in it in a way that's beyond just like in the bedroom, you feel these things, which like, yes, I think, yes, let's have more good sex. Let's have more wonderful orgasms for sure. And also, I do think that pleasure and sexuality is one place that we as a culture have repressed and oppressed people a lot. And so it doesn't always feel safe or okay for us to invest our time and energy in it, like think it's important enough for us to care about or work on or have help with. So sexology, again, just sort of the study of human sexuality. And it's in the context that I operate, I'm a coach. So I'm really a sex coach with training in sexology and relationship coaching. It's really similar to being a sex therapist, but I'm just not a therapist. I don't have a clinical licensure to operate as a therapist, and I don't pathologize/diagnose anybody. I don't really use the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, things like that. I really work with folks who are like, here's a thing that I'd like to do. Here's what's happening for me, and here's where I'd like to go. And then I help people go from where they are right now to where they would rather be.
So is it kind of if somebody is not having as much sex as they want, afraid to initiate sex, having conversations with partners that don't feel totally aligned with their sexuality? Is that kind of examples of when
Yeah.
people, yeah.
Yeah, I
What
think
else?
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people experiencing pain during sex, or people who would like to be more available to their partner but have trauma around sexuality or difficulty with it. A lot of people have a lot of shame. And I honestly think that shame around sex and sexuality is one of the biggest problems that people have. And it can show up in so many different ways in our bodies and in the way that we interact with sexuality and our own sexuality and that with others. So I think that a lot of the work is around releasing the things that we feel shameful about and learning what is allowed and what is okay, and learning to accept ourselves as we are completely
Yeah.
fun. It's
I think,
such a fun journey to be on as a person.
yeah, I think shame is an interesting feeling dynamic though, because I've talked to people before where I've been like, it seems like you have shame about this. And they've been like, oh no, it's just the rule. I don't have shame about it. This is just how things are. I'm just not supposed to do that. Like, dynamic of shame, I think, is more layered than we a lot of times think, because I think there's an initial layer of I have an urge. The urge is not okay, but we think that's an observation. We're not even necessarily feeling shame about it. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, it does make sense. I think we don't always feel the shame that
Yeah.
we experience. I think it doesn't always feel the same way. Like sometimes we feel guilt, which is a little different than shame. Like guilt is like, oh, an incident happened. I feel bad about it. I could maybe do something about that. Shame is more of and I'd say like guilt. Okay, I also love to use the chakra system as part of where the somatic part of somatic sexology comes in for me, because chakras are a part of our physiological experience and also a spiritual symbology slash, kind of gateway almost. And so I think of guilt as really a sacral chakra wound, sacral being that space of feeling, kind of below between your belly button and your pubic bone would be like kind of your sacral space. And that's your creative and erotic energy and really your kind of sense and feeling of your desires. That's where guilt comes in, I think. And then for shame, I think that's more of a solar plexus wound. Solar plexus being that space of agency and of your personal will, like your right to act and for your actions to have impact. I think shame keeps us stuck because it keeps us from locating and using our own power because we're a little bit afraid, I think, of that. And also, shame is a really powerful immobilizing force, frankly.
Mhm.
So, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it calcifies in us. Like, I think it actually becomes almost like part of our fascia in a way. I think that's part of what actually causes challenges during sex or in sexual encounters with folks is that sometimes shame is a thing that makes us hold or clench rather than allow, because shame is saying this isn't allowed. And like actually pleasure is almost entirely about allowing sensation and allowing enjoyment. It's not about pushing for something or chasing something. It's about receiving it and allowing it to exist and making space for that. So I think that's a way that we sort of again like embody these things and make them a part of how we physically experience the world.
That's interesting. I guess I'm curious because I hear people say more commonly, you hear a lot, oh, my partner wants a different amount of sex than me. Basically, they don't want to have as much sex as me. They're pressuring me for sex, right?
Mhm.
Or you hear, I think really commonly now, especially not just with Gen Z, but specifically with Gen Z, but I also see this with millennials. Like I want to have a partner, but I don't know if they're going to like me or something like that. And I think to me, some of that language is maybe ways that people can identify whether they feel shame or not, because I think we
Mhm.
have a cultural overlay it's shameful to feel shame. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Identifying that you feel shame, I think can be tricky because we're like, oh no, I'm proud of myself.
Mhm.
It's this other person's preference that is the
Yeah.
problem, right?
Right.
Which I think is a tricky indicator that you might be feeling shame.
It is because it's sort of a refractory way of experiencing it, or like you're projecting it a little bit onto your partner as if the thing that like you do want to comply or be whatever they want or something.
Normal, like there's
Yeah,
kind of set standard of normal. Somebody's
right.
not complying with normal. If everybody was just
Yeah.
normal, we would all
Yeah.
have what we need,
It
right?
would all be perfect if we could all just be whatever normal is, you know? Let's
Yeah.
all be right at the top of the bell curve. That's
Yeah.
normal. That's it. The one little tiny point right at the very tippy top. That's it. But no, that's not real, right? That's not how humanity is. So, yeah, I think sometimes we do experience impacts from shame without recognizing that that is what's happening. And I think, you know, overall, I talk a lot about what I call the seven deadly sins of purity culture. And I've gone through those in detail in a past episode. But I think that one of the really important things to recognize is anytime you're questioning or not in touch with your autonomy, with your own experience of pleasure, the space in your own body and your life to have pleasure, that you're not, if you're not in touch with your agency, your ability to take action and do things in the world, if you struggle with self loathing or with like struggling to love yourself or even know yourself or understand yourself, important things to notice there. And then how, you know, a challenge that people often have is communication. Like, how do I communicate about sex? How do I say what I want? How do, in the moment, how do I communicate about it? Because a lot of times we feel shut down. We're really given a lot of content about sex, but not a lot of help around it culturally. It's like you're on your own, and we all feel kind of weird about watching sex scenes in movies with our parents, I guess. But like they're there, you know? So it's a part of culture. It's like an unspoken expectation, but it is also something that people all experience at a really individual level. And that collectively, we're still very strangely prudish and judgmental while also taking the sensational parts of sex and sexuality and like putting those sort of front and center in a different way culturally. So there's a lot of mismatch between what our individual like personal experiences are and in our relationships as contrasted to how we experience sex and sexuality as a topic in culture also, which I think is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. How do you think, what kinds of sort of miscommunications or communication challenges do you think come up most for people around this topic?
Yeah. I mean, I think we start with consent. You know, I think that that issue has been one that we've been talking about more commonly in public for about 10 years on the heels of Me Too. That has been a more robust conversation in society, which I think is great. But it also is something that I think we have to internalize and understand is within us to want and say yes to or no to things. So that one is a challenging thing because I think we don't always ask ourselves what we want. Like I think it depends on how you were raised, I guess, but for me that a lot comes from being raised in purity culture in a, you know, high control religious environment where I was taught that sex was bad until I was heterosexually married to one human cisgendered man and that is the only context in which sex is allowed. And then what happens when you get married and you find out, oops, we're sexually incompatible? Like we didn't know that because we didn't have sex before we got married. Oopsies. You know, that's something. But anyway, going back to consent, I think it starts with asking yourself, what do I want? What do I need? What feels good to me? And then consenting to those things when they're available, but also for yourself just to understand what is the breadth and depth of my own sexual interest. Like maybe you do know, maybe you haven't explored it. Maybe it's something that just deserves a little bit of time and attention. So thinking a little bit about like, how do I feel attraction? How do I feel sexual? Like what makes me feel good in this space, and what are the things that are turnoffs or shutting me down, and how do I want to work with that information? So truly like a lot of it is about connecting in with what you actually want and allowing the space for yourself to want something at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, and to not allow yourself to not want some things too, it seems like.
Yeah, totally. Right,
Yeah.
right, which is also okay. So I think there's a lot to that, but I do think that sex becomes a really tense tool sometimes in romantic partnerships and marriages. I think especially because we start to get a sense of like, oh, as as a partner, it's my job to fulfill my partner's needs, which is actually
Mhm.
not true, to be honest. Like your partner, if they're an adult, which they should be if you're having sex with them, obviously, but I should say it because apparently culturally we do not know that, I guess, Epstein files. Anyway, point being, if you are in a relationship with an adult person, it's their job to meet their needs. And it's your job to meet your needs. And your needs might coincide. You might be able to meet each other's needs sometimes, but if your partner isn't meeting your needs, or if you don't, if they're telling you you're not meeting theirs, that's actually something for you guys to each figure out, yes, together, and also what parts of this are for you and not. Like you don't have to do things you don't want to do sexually or physically or otherwise with somebody if it doesn't feel resonant to you or doesn't feel good to you. It also doesn't mean that you need to keep them from pursuing meeting their needs. And that's, I think, a question of how do you want your relationship structure to be, which
Yeah.
again, a whole other conversation and a question, and one that's scary. Like I think the truth is part of talking about sex and thinking through what is sexology and wanting to make changes around this stuff in your life. It can be really scary because we realize like, oh, this is something really crucial and important in relationships. I do think we make sex both way more consequential and way less consequential in culture than it should be. You know, it's a natural human function. It's something most people do want and enjoy to some degree. Not everyone, and that's fine too. But it is also something that kind of culturally becomes like a huge deal when it doesn't always have to be a huge deal. And that also is up to you to understand for yourself, how do I experience sex and sexuality? Like, am I demi? If I'm demisexual, then I have a desire to have a romantic connection with somebody. And my sexuality doesn't really kind of come into play so much with them until I feel that romantic connection. That's not my situation. I'm not a demisexual. I'm a allosexual, meaning that I can have sex and it be really casual and fun, and I also can have sex and it be really deep and meaningful. It just depends on the context and the partner and who I'm with and what I'm accomplishing in that moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. That brought up a bunch more questions for me. So I'm going to start with the first one that I thought of, and that was I think one of the things that you're touching on is not just consent but also rejection and how we deal
Hmm.
with rejection. I feel like
Yeah,
that's a main I think the consent topic is such an important one. And obviously in my background I've seen a lot of non-consensual situations and the reverberations of trauma people can have around that. I've also seen the spectrum of people uh saying yes to things that they meant no to and the confusion that happens around that related to consent. But I think rejection is a space that we don't navigate very well.
totally.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's rejection in if you make an advance, even if you are already partnered and you make a sexual advance on your partner. Let's say you're like try to initiate, and they're like, ugh, no, I don't want to. Okay, that can feel like a rejection, and that can pile up over time and make you feel like, why am I trying anymore? That is a thing that can happen for sure. I think being a person who does the rejecting also has an impact too. Sometimes that's hard to do on a consistent basis. So it's interesting because we don't always kind of get into the relational aspects of it. Like we're not always having a real conversation about I would like to connect with you this way because it's an important part of our relationship to me and like let's do that. Life gets in the way. What if you have kids? What if you have a messy kitchen? What if you have to go to work? What if you have a car payment due? Like there's all these stressors and stuff in life. So we aren't going to all just sit around feeding each other grapes and having sex all day usually, but we also, you know, maybe you
That's
can
my
on a
dream
Saturday here and
though.
there. Eat
Yeah,
some
would
peeled
you?
grapes like yeah, be fanned. But like I think, yeah, I think the rejection part is really challenging. And it is hard not to take it personally sometimes too. And, you know, I was married for 8 years and as I mentioned earlier, even though I was saying it hypothetically, my ex-husband and I didn't have sex before we got married because we were both raised in that religious milieu. And even though I was old enough and I didn't really care that much, it was kind of like, well, why bother doing it now? Like I've come this far. Why not just get over that finish line and hit marriage as a virgin, I guess. Bad idea. It was a bad idea. Actually, as soon as it happened, I was like, if I could go back into all of the youth group kids I ever told not to have sex till they got married, I would be like, actually, maybe you should.
Yeah.
Maybe you should try it. Like, you should maybe see if this is going to work between you and this person before you decide to be with them forever. Like, it's important to do that. And well, if you missed that
Yeah.
train, okay, now you renegotiate things. And so being married to somebody that we didn't have a lot of sexual compatibility, I was the one that was always trying to initiate. And it was usually I was being rebuffed a lot. And there are lots of reasons why, you know, it's not that my ex-husband is bad. It's just that that part of our relationship was not, it didn't make sense and it wasn't compatible. And so I did get rejected all the time, and it made me feel tired. It made me not want to try. But because I am a sexual person, I still did. I still tried and dealt with that rejection quite often. And it was sort of demoralizing, but I also felt like it was something that we could talk about here and there. That said, it was also not like when I did get the sex that I was asking for, trying to initiate, it was also not particularly satisfying for me. It was just like it was something, it was better than nothing. And I'm a very physically affectionate person. So it was weird for me to be in a relationship with somebody who is extremely not that way.
Yeah.
Even, just holding hands or like hugging or cuddling or something. That was just not a way that he expresses his emotions to people. So there's a lot there that I think just sort of set us up to be in a weird situation. But yeah, dealing with rejection is hard, and being rejected regularly is hard, and some of it can be handled by having more honest conversations about, here's like what I am looking for in connection, what are you looking for in connection, what feels good to both of us, what is now missing for me, or what's missing for you, or how do we want to meet here, because it is really about two people or multiple people, depending on the situation, meeting in a space of connectedness and openness and being willing to be intimate in some ways.
Yeah, I think another space where rejection can come up is like trying to avoid rejection ahead of time during dating
Mhm. Yeah.
by limiting your own understanding of what is correct for you, of what you want, and
Yeah.
attending more to do other people want you, like trying to perfect yourself so that you're
Hmm.
desirable. And I honestly, that sounds more like it would apply to women than men, but I think you see a lot of men in the manosphere doing this. If you have a chiseled jaw, then women will be attracted to you. So then you don't have to
Hmm.
be afraid of rejection, kind
Yeah.
of. And I think
Yeah.
sex is like this weirdly intimate space where rejection is healthy,
Hmm.
but we like make it not healthy
Right.
and
Right.
we make it about self-worth, kind of.
Totally. Yeah, we do make it about self-worth. And I think it's a place where, like, when we're trying to appear perfect for someone else, and I mean, I do this. This is like the great lie of my life. I've been saying for years is that I need to be perfect so I can be loved. And it is true that everyone has a different definition of what perfect means. So I can contort myself in lots of different configurations to show up as whatever perfect seems to be for any other person. Not because I'm trying to like be deceitful or lie or present something that I'm not, but because I want to be that, like, because I want to be the thing that the person that I care about needs and wants. So I want to meet their needs. It is also important for us to recognize, like, well, even if I'm bringing my shape together with this other person's shape, we have to like fit here in like a matching. Not that I need to be smaller so they can have all the room, or that I need to be so big that they don't have any room. Like, we have to come together and figure out what is this going to look like together.
Which
And
is
it is
tough.
scary. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
and
It is hard.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a healthy amount of rejection that is around that, communication around that, and then there's like
Mhm.
a space where you start to feel like it's a mismatch, and I think
Mhm.
instead of saying things are a mismatch, we want to say people are being unreasonable instead of just that
Mhm.
they're being different, kind of.
Mhm.
And then in some
Yeah.
situations, people are being unreasonable. So it's all like,
Right.
or
Right. And
abusive or
that's
whatever. Yeah.
totally right. Those
Yeah.
dynamics can happen. And so being
Yeah.
aware of those is really important. But I think it is true. Like, you can be in a relationship with a perfectly fine, great person, and the relationship itself isn't good. That can happen. And, you can, yeah, we can do things all kinds of different ways. But I think that's an important
Yeah.
one. It is
Yeah.
hard. I think the truth is, like, what I do with people, with like the practice of sexology and the way that I approach it, is that somatic side. It is, how do I create self-trust? Like, I think, like, the true story, real thing is, I don't think that you can have a good sexual experience or like good orgasms without trust. And that trust has to start with yourself, like your own mind, spirit, and body. And so learning who you are and understanding what is my gender, like what is my sexuality, who am I attracted to, and what ways am I attracted to people, who do I feel romantic about, who do I feel just sexually attracted to, and what relationship styles feel good to me. Like, do I want to be in a monogamous relationship with somebody, or do I want to be with one main partner and then have a constellation of other people that I see also? Or, do I want to be solo polyamorous? Like, what are the different ways that you want your life to be set up? Because there's so many different ways that we can decide how to create our lives to fit who we are. And understanding who we are at any given moment is a process and a practice. It's not just only the mental exercise of doing these things, but it's also, again, like checking in with the body as an oracle to say, okay, here's a question. Like, how often do I generally want to be sexually active? Like, is this an everyday thing for me? Is this once a week? Is it every month? Like, what do I experience now? And being just in a space where you start to notice yourself more and you start to like be open to the information and data that you're receiving from your body that you normally override because the urge isn't convenient, or because you aren't really into your partner right now, or you just had a baby and it's not fun to have sex yet. Like, there's lots and lots of reasons why we do ebb and flow on that. But it is really important to know yourself, and being able to know yourself gives you that self-trust. And then from there, understanding the way your own body experiences enjoyment and pleasure, what what can you do within your own body basically to seek out obstacles to freedom and remove them? That's something that is about actually experiencing life from within the human body, not just from your brain. And that's something that takes a lot of practice, because we don't live in a culture that allows us to live in our bodies. We live in a culture that requires us to override our bodies constantly for the purposes of capitalism and taking care of everybody else besides us. And that's the way that it's set up on purpose, because that works great for systems and for capitalism, but does not work great for human people. And so, as a person, a big part, I think, of understanding who you are is also giving yourself the space to live at the pace of human time, to get to know yourself and have that sense of self-trust and self-intimacy. And then from that space of recognizing, like, this is who I am, this is what I feel in my body, this is how I experience connection and sexuality and enjoyment and collaboration and whatever else, then you bring that together with another sovereign person who's also sovereign, just like you are, and figure out how these things connect and decide to build a relationship from there. And that's how you build intimacy with other people. One, recognizing your own sovereignty and other people's sovereignty. And that isn't something that we build into how we generally approach relationships. We approach relationships culturally from a enmeshment standpoint. Like, the relationships that we admire the most are the relationships where we see people, to become one. We want it to be like a perfect happily ever after thing. And Taylor and Travis got married and nothing bad's ever going to happen again. We're definitely not going to get a divorce album at any time.
I think, okay, I have a lot of questions based on what you said, but it sounds like when you're talking about when you're working with somebody, that you partner alongside of them in their process to get in touch with their body and then really target what the challenges are towards what their body says is right for them, and then even communicating with the partner about
Mm-hmm.
what is right for them and how do they negotiate their agreements, how do they have more
Yeah.
productive conversations around meeting both partners' needs, or finding out whatever is
Mm-hmm.
going to meet the partner's need if it's not each
Yeah.
other. Is that
Yeah.
kind of sound? That
Mm-hmm.
is so awesome. When you do, this is a logistical question, but when you do that, um, can you walk through as a logistical matter? Do you meet in person? Do you meet online? Like, how? And I partly am asking this because I think for a lot of people, we're so taught to be ashamed about this topic. We're
Mm-hmm.
so taught that there's one normal way to talk about this, and there's one normal way to be about it. And it's just to be cool and chill all the time and never have a problem and never need support. And I know that was true for me, even working with people on a sexual harassment, sexual assault side of things, even with criminal activity, people are still like, I just want to be cool and normal about this. I don't want to
Yeah,
be an
totally.
inconvenience to anybody. So I wonder how you handle things logistically like that with folks. Yeah.
Yeah. I do. I like to work with people in person. I also work with people online. It doesn't necessarily change the quality of what we're doing together. It just is, it's just a different attunement. And so I do integrate a lot of other somatic and energetic practices into the work that I do with people, including Reiki and yoga. And as a part of the kind of the yoga side of things, path working, helping people kind of connect with their inner landscape of like what their body is on the inside, and to connect also with what their own desires are through seeking that out internally. So I do meet with people individually if I'm coaching people who are in partnerships, whether it's one partner or multiple partners. I usually work with individuals in those partnerships, but I also will work with the group as well. I also, as a way to start off, like to help people connect in really initially with their desires, like basically starting with like what are your needs, desires, and boundaries, and recognizing those parts of who you are. Those come from your root chakra. Your needs are from that. It's survival. It's like, how do you survive in the world? Your sacral chakra is desires. What do you feel and what do you want? And understanding what that is. And then your agency being, how do you develop boundaries, meaning where do I begin and end? And where do you begin and end? And how do I have my own space and you have your own space? And therefore, we are both sovereign in our own ways, in our own selves, rather than enmeshed or codependent or otherwise in a relationship that is not generative as much as it is sapping, I guess, is what
I
I'll
mean, I feel
say.
like the other version of relationship that I see sometimes is like just a transactional
Mm-hmm.
relationship. Like we're here to pay the bills, get the groceries done, raise the kids. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we have an agreement that doesn't involve any kind of intimacy. And usually one of the partners in that wants that to be the case, wants it to be a transactional
Yeah.
experience, but often the other one doesn't, I think
Mm-hmm.
is kind of a common
Mm-hmm.
thing, which is
Yeah.
more the separated relationship versus the
Yeah.
enmeshed. Yeah. But it
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
like when people are coming to you, you can tailor the experience around what feels safe to them and
Mm-hmm.
what level of engagement
Yeah.
feels right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's
Yeah.
also, I mean, this is also a thing that I'm not exactly always sure how to talk about because I don't want people to be afraid to come to me. If they're like, I want to save my relationship. I'm really not a save the relationship kind of a guy,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I'm really a like, anytime. Okay. I love to watch shows like Love Island, let's say, Perfect Match. The Ultimatum, whatever it is, a television reality dating show is hilarious for me. One of the reasons I think it's so interesting is because oftentimes people will like couple up at the beginning and then just stay in it just to stay in it. And they'll be like, we have to make this work like early on. Like you just met each other. This is Love is Blind. You've never met each other in real life. And you're
Yeah.
like talking through a wall and you're like, we've got to make this work. Let's fight for this. What are
Yeah.
you fighting for? Okay, stop it. But also in real life, we do that all the time. And we're like, I'm in a relationship. We get really locked into sunk cost fallacy, meaning
Yeah.
I'm going to throw good money after bad. Your relationship might be an energetic money pit, and you just don't know because you're attuned to and trained to try to make it work at every cost. I'm honestly not into that. I think it's important for you to, yes, invest in the relationships that are important to you and like have the relationships that you want to have in your life. Do I think that just because you're partnered with somebody, that's like a permanent situation that always needs to be? No, not at all. And I think people change. I think we adapt, we grow. Sometimes we grow together, sometimes we grow apart. All of those things are fine. I think a relationship ending should just be a normal part of life and not a tragedy necessarily, not a failure for sure. I think that's a big part of this too, is recognizing there are a lot more options than we're giving ourselves for how things can be we get stuck because we think we're trapped, but we're only trapped because we're only giving ourselves the like yes or no, all or nothing answer that culturally we've been handed as our options. When really we're really creative, we could come up with an infinity of ways to have a nice and beautiful life and to have a relationship with a person that you love and care about, whether or not that relationship continues to be a full partnership or a friendship, or are you going to still have sex or not? Like, there's so many different things that can happen. And I do think that a lot of times folks who I tend to meet are people who grew up like I did, coming through purity culture. A lot of people who are in that situation get married really young. They don't know who they are. You know, we're like raised up and then we're like, I'm 20, let's do this. We're
Yeah.
legally allowed to get married. So now we should. And then they do. And then 30 years later, it's like, oh, well, I guess that's not where we're at anymore. Like, how do we want to renegotiate this? I'm really more of like the tower card in tarot, the tower card being a cataclysmic event a little bit, but also a shaking loose of what no longer serves you and aligning underneath that with what remains and what is true. I think it's also beautiful in the tarot, the next star being, or the next card being the star, that like inner sense, that inner North Star, the guidance that you find underneath the drama of the tower. And I really feel like that's the crux of where my work lives, is in that space of like disruption and change and coming home back to yourself and discovering really the shining star of who you really are.
Okay, so I know that we've talked about this some in the Pride episode, but you've brought up purity culture a couple of times. Can we define purity culture for people who might not know, who might be less directly aware that they're impacted by it than maybe you and I had direct purity culture
Mm-hmm.
experiences where we were like read the I Kiss Dating Goodbye in a group of
Mm-hmm.
girls and discuss how to not seduce men by wearing short sleeve shirts.
You don't
Like,
want to cause your brother to stumble, do you?
but I think that there are reverberations of purity culture that happen throughout and outside of the church, even. So let's define what purity culture is.
Yeah, great. Okay. First, I'm going to define it by being annoying. And the thing I'm going to say that's annoying is purity culture is rape culture, is purity culture, is rape culture, is rape culture, is purity culture. It's all the same thing. Those things basically are patriarchal, misogynistic in nature, saying it's like kind of, you know what, we could even go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. It's the woman is a temptress, men cannot be repressed, women have to be the gatekeepers of all sex and access to sex. They should be hot, but not too hot. They should be sexually available, but not wanted. Like, those are the tenets of sexual, like rape culture and purity culture, both essentially. So
Yeah.
it's overtly in purity culture, girls are taught that sex is basically it's not for you. Like, sex is for the man's pleasure. I want to also say this is all extremely gender binary based because that's the only frame that they use, like in the high control religion side of things. So it's if you were born with a vulva, you're a girl and you are taught that sex is not for you. You don't need to enjoy it. When I was in high school youth group, there would always be conversations about masturbation, but only the boys would be talking about that, and or it was assumed only boys ever did that. I did. So I was like, uh-oh, I must be the only girl who knows about this. Like, I guess I invented it and no other girls have ever known. Weird. And what do I do? I guess I just have to be quiet and never tell anyone because it's a terrible secret shame to have that, was never okay. So you're not really supposed to want or enjoy sex if you're born with a vulva. If you're born with a penis, you literally can't do anything but think about sex at all once you reach a certain age. You're always looking at a girl, judging whether or not she's wearing spaghetti straps. And if she's wearing spaghetti straps, then it's okay for you to get out of control and do whatever you want to her because she's asking for it. I mean, I'm being very like crass, but actually, like, this is kind of what it is. So this is
Well, and I
in
think,
this way, that's how purity culture and rape culture are the same exact
yeah.
culture. Purity culture is cloaked under being good and virtuous, and like it's also very racist as well. Let's just be honest. Like another part of it is that white girlhood is elevated above all other forms of girlhood, which is gross and wrong. You know, it is, especially Black girl children are really focused, and young people are seen as Jezebels, racist. Like it is also racist. So let's be real about that too. Like I think it's important for us to recognize purity culture in particular is overtly about white girlhood being pure and upheld, and also about women in general being the gatekeepers, as I describe it, the goalie to our own vaginas. Like you have to deflect, which gets back to consent, which gets back to why is it so hard for us to even say what we want? We aren't allowed to want anything. You're not supposed to. That's bad for you to want. Even the men who are irrepressible and we're supposed to forgive, they still aren't supposed to want. They're supposed to pluck their eye out if it causes them to want to commit adultery. Like, because that's also just as bad as having already done it. That in the Christian milieu. Like that's part of it. It's just like a real mind fuck.
Yeah, and I think that there's an underlying message of sex is inherently a dangerous act that
Mm-hmm.
needs parameters around it that are set
Mm-hmm.
by outside institutions rather than individuals. So you have to look
Right.
to an outside institution to tell you what's normal and
Mm-hmm.
acceptable about sex. And if you are looking to yourself, then you have bought into the dangerousness of sexuality that's out of control and a threat to everyone, right? And
100%.
I think that it lands differently on the binary because it does only exist on the binary. But I think it lands differently where men are allowed to be part of the out of controlness and they're the source of the out of controlness. So there is more acceptability for men to have sex, but not
Mm-hmm.
good sex,
Right.
really. And
Right. And
then
not necessarily connected sex either. Like
that's what kind of
you're
what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
supposed to have sex but not care about the person you're having sex with, kind of.
Yeah. And that you
Yeah.
have to cut off the empathetic, compassionate part of yourself because you're perpetrating something against the other person, right? You're
Right.
inherently a perpetrator. And then
Right.
for women, it's like this is a threat to you and to your eternal soul,
Hmm.
but also to your body. And you should not expect to be met with compassion and connection, really. And then
Right.
I
Because it's
think
not for you. It's just not for you.
it's not
Yeah.
for you. If you have pleasure during it, there's something wrong with you, unless it's within the institutional parameters that are preset and quote unquote normal. And then if it's within that, you must have pleasure,
Mhm.
but
You
also
must
you must have,
perform pleasure at
yeah,
least.
at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to go from being pure and chaste to a nympho overnight, using nympho in quotation marks because it's not a real thing and also a slur. But I said it anyway because
And
sometimes I
it
think
is
we can reclaim words.
And also, it is a word that one of our friends had it used against her by a Christian man because she enjoyed sex with him. And she told him that she enjoyed sex with him, and he was like, "Oh, you're a nympho." This is the dynamic that I think happens
Yep.
within purity culture is men who want sex are sabotaging their own opportunities to have sex
Yep.
because they've been taught that a woman who wants to have sex with them is evil.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's here for your downfall. She's like basically a succubus, you know? I mean, it is not okay. And again, like culturally, the people who get called sluts are women, you know. I mean, I will talk about the current season of Love Island well, it's almost over, but we'll talk about it in another episode.
Yeah,
And I'm not
don't
going to talk
spoil
about
it
it
for
here because it'll spoil it for you. So dang
me.
it, but I really want to. I will say generally, you know, sometimes you can see in the villa the same behaviors perpetrated by a man and a woman in
Yeah,
two different contexts, and the woman receives a lot more blowback for it than the man,
yeah.
even though the man I think is more egregious and heinous in the act. It's just like it's not allowed for a woman to be like that. Even now. I mean, even now in Love Island this season, they're calling each other lustful as like an insult to
Oh, no. I'm
oh,
really
that's really
backtrack.
lustful. I just think your relationship is lustful. And I'm like, what the fuck? You guys are
Well,
doing challenges where you're licking each other's faces off. Like, this is what the show is. What are you talking about?
and I think that's the thing to me where I think we can minimize the reverberations of purity culture because
Mm-hmm.
these people on Love Island, most of them do not identify as evangelical Christians. And yet they're using the language of evangelical Christianity in a show that is meant for people
Yeah.
to lick their faces off each
Yeah.
other. And that, I think, to me, this is a very pervasive rhetoric. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that people can ask themselves to see if they're impacted by it is, have I had the thought that person wants too much sex or not enough sex?
Mm-hmm.
I want too much sex or not enough sex?
Mm-hmm.
If you have had thoughts like that, which you probably have, you are
Mm-hmm.
impacted by purity culture, I think.
Yeah. I
The
think you're
way I
right.
want sex is evil or wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to put parameters around that of if you are having non-consensual sex or sex with somebody who's not old enough to consent or sober enough to consent, that can be dangerous. And I don't want to say there's no spaces where sex can be dangerous. I do really think that there are. And
Mm-hmm.
that is about the ability to consent. It's not about the inherent evil of the act. And I think when we
Right.
say the act is inherently evil, we justify things that are harmful because it just falls within the overall umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think in those kinds of cases, there's out of control sexual behavior where there's a lot of challenge, like that would I think encompass things like pedophilia for one. But I think people can have desires that they don't act on that are a part of that kind of experience. But yeah, I do think that the consent side is really important and that recognizing also the power of sex to create power dynamics that are
Yeah.
off kilter is really important as well.
Because it's really different to me to know that you have a kink for blonde hair and ask your partner to wear a blonde wig than to say many white children are born with blonde hair, and so I'm going to act that out non-consensually that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's quite different to consensually act out a kink
Hmm. Right.
than to act it out in a harmful way.
Absolutely. And again, the concept of consent is like the most important
Yeah.
thing there of like who can consent, an adult, the end. An adult human
Yeah.
person can consent or not consent to sexual
Yeah.
activity. And that is the only criteria that there really ultimately is.
Yeah, and I think the other way that I think is really a pervasive thing that people can kind of ask themselves to see if this has impacted them and if they need to kind of unpack it or question it is this idea of that we already kind of talked about of if I'm not ahead of time following certain rules or certain standards, me wanting sex is embarrassing
Hmm.
or me nobody will want to have sex with me.
Yeah.
We put up pretty weird standards. I see all this online stuff where men will post and say, if women are really honest, they want a man with serious pecs who's under 220, who's 6'4", with a chiseled jaw. And then all these women comment and are like, okay, this is what gay men might want from you. This might be what you want in a gay male partner. This is not what women want, and vice versa. I think that you see attraction is just weird
Yeah.
inherently. We're just weirdly attracted
Hmm.
to each other,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
humans,
Yeah.
and that is not preset by looks, by
Hmm.
weight, by height.
Yeah.
Like,
It's informed by culture. And so if we get too much in our heads about it, then we do end up adopting cultural beauty standards and ideals and the way that we're supposed to, quote unquote, approach relationships with other people. And I also think apps are an interesting thing because when you meet someone in real life, there's a different thing that happens because you feel them Like
Yeah.
you're in their energetic field. When
Yeah,
you're
I
on an
actually
app, it's not the same. And so
I
I
have
think
a
there
really hard
is,
time. I really
yeah,
don't like apps at all because it's
yeah,
like I'm looking at a blank piece of paper and trying
yeah,
to decide if I'm attracted to a blank piece of paper. I have a wildly different experience in person than I
yeah,
have on apps.
totally.
Unless I have had experiences on social media, like different platforms where I've had a long enough conversation with somebody that I've
Hmm.
been independently attracted to them. I had a Canadian boyfriend one time and it was quite sweet and romantic and he came
Uh-uh.
to visit me ultimately and it was weird in person because
Yeah,
we had knew each other through only written word. It was just
yeah,
so weird to be like add
yeah,
on a layer. Yeah.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so you talked about being demisexual and allosexual. I think it's really fun to categorize. I love like personality tests. So I don't know if
yeah,
anybody else thinks that this is interesting, but I feel like it would be interesting to me if you would go over different sexual orientations, different relationship styles, like all
yeah,
of those. And not to say, I don't want to quiz you that you have to say everything
yeah,
like
yeah.
accurately, but yeah.
Totally. Well, I mean, this is actually fun because one of the tools that I learned about in my sexology training was using gender, sexuality, and relationship style kind of spectrums, we'll call them.
Yeah.
Spectra, I don't know what the correct plural term is, but
Right.
looking at that as a way for people to identify themselves, also recognizing that identity can shift and change on the scale. Like our self identity and our sexuality are fluid for real, like throughout our lives. And so you might come out in the world as a 20-year-old and think you're straight and, monogamous. Great, go ahead. And then 10 years later, you're like, oh shit, I think I like ladies. Like, what am I going to do with that? So that happens and that's fine. It's like a normal part of life is that is okay for you to shift and change. So the way that I like to think about it is instead of really coming up with like 10,000 alphabet soup letters that all go into
Yeah.
LGBTQIA2S plus, like
Yeah.
it is, yes, that. And also, there's like an infinite number of ways that you can define yourself. So if you think about gender as not a binary, and I don't even want to think of it as a spectrum that's like a straight across line. It's
Right.
like a circle. It's more like a color wheel, like that has all the colors and you can poke it wherever and you get whatever hex code you get. I don't know if any of you guys are
Yeah.
using design tools, but that's one
I'm
thing you can do.
fifth dimensional,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
rainbow butterfly.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean I think it is richer than just like male,
Yeah.
female, what are you in between here? Because if we were to say that it's like, well, the right things are the male and the female and those are the if you're on either end of that, you're regular. And if you're somewhere in between, you're not. That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's much more of a multidimensional thing. And so thinking about gender identity, okay, how do I feel inside? Like what, do I resonate with the cultural idea of what is a woman? I don't know, maybe sometimes a little bit. Do I identify or resonate with the cultural idea of what is a man? I don't know. In some ways, I guess so. But like, what do I want to say my gender is? For me, I identify as a woman. I'm a cisgendered woman. And I also don't identify as like the most feminine of women. Like, I'm not a makeup wearer. I don't ever wear heels. Like, those are all costume things, though. Right. But that's also part of it. It's like, how do I express myself in my gender identity? I have
Yeah.
long hair and you know, whatever. Like there's just lots of different
Well,
ways that we get to do that. And that's part of it is being able to say, like, this is how I feel inside and how I want to express myself
yeah,
outside. And
that's a
to
really
be
good.
seen and experienced by other people. That's why it's beautiful for people to have whatever their pronouns are and share that if they want to. If you want to wear a dress, wear a dress. If you want to wear shorts, wear shorts. If you want to walk around in fishnets, who cares? Like, this is also a part of it. So really like feeling into what parts of the gender concept feel right to you? What do you want to reject from it? Like, do you want to live outside of defined gender? Like, it doesn't, you could do whatever you want with it. But understanding where you are with that is a really powerful way for you to express yourself in the world. with sexuality, I think there are lots of different ways to think about it too. So, one, you want to think about like, how do I experience romance and attraction in that way? Romance being the like feelings of loveness. And some people are like, that's a really important part of the relationship. And some people, it's not as important. And then the next piece on that is sexual attraction. Like, who am I attracted to? What other genders do I find interesting and attractive? Do I only like one other gender? Do I like all of the genders? Do I like only people who are cisgender, but like I like men and women? Like, there's lots of different ways that that can express too. So understanding kind of the complexity of all of that. I'm making it sound really complicated, but there are tools for this, and I don't have them up yet, but I will
No,
have
yeah.
that up
I
soon.
think
Yeah.
that makes sense. And I also think knowing what attraction feels like to you can be
Mm-hmm.
really unique to each
Yeah.
person. I
Yeah.
know I have a really defined sense of attraction in my body. I'm a yes or a no. It's
Mm-hmm.
very strong in my body. And I think most people in human design who have defined sacral centers feel that way. And then it's
Yeah.
very confusing to them to connect with people who don't have defined sacral centers, who have open sacral centers, who for them attraction may be maybe a different sensation in their body. It maybe
Yeah.
feel more like curiosity. It may feel more like being energized. It may not have that very strict biological genitalia reaction.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And like,
Yeah.
what are the things that are attractive to you? I mean, because another thing, people will identify as like a sapiosexual. That's like
Yeah.
you like people who are smart. You're intrigued by the intellectual banter that you have with somebody. There's lots of different ways that you can identify attraction and sexual interest as well. So really getting to know yourself is really cool. And then you do have kind of a more expansive vocabulary and understanding to have conversations with other people about what they're
Yeah.
interested in and who they are and how they identify themselves as well.
Yeah. I'm a demisexual person, and my experience of that has been interesting because I have had similar experiences, I think, to women who ultimately realize that they're lesbians, where I have had experiences where a man is interested in me, and I'm like inexplicably not interested in the person at first.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, "Oh, he's, like, an attractive guy culturally, right? So I should be into him.
Mm-hmm.
I bet I'm attracted to him." And I think, oh, like, my friends who have come out later in life as lesbians that I've seen them have this experience too. Like,
Yeah.
he's a hot guy, and then as things develop, something happens where I'm like, this is a completely emotionally trustworthy person. And that's
Uh-huh.
why I didn't have the sexual attraction to them, even though I couldn't explain it. But
Yeah.
because I'm demisexual, the emotional connection and reliability and trust is like a precursor to the sexual attraction, where I've
Mm-hmm.
conversely had experiences where I've been like, I am so attracted to this guy, and I could not explain to you based on a cultural norm of like hotness, but can't stop thinking about them, very physically attracted. So I think that's another kind of interesting, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
personal experience to me.
Yeah, it totally is. And it's fun to know that about
Yeah.
yourself too,
Yeah.
because it's like a little bit of a playground
Yeah. Or
to
like a
have some.
puzzle that
Mhm.
you're like, oh, what's going to happen next? I don't know what this picture looks like.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And I think it does bring that curiosity, and I think it allows relationships to unfold. I mean, honestly, like coming out of being raised in purity culture and all the messages around sex is for being married, the goal of every relationship that I ever had before I was married was, can I get married to this person or not?
Right.
And like,
Right.
you have to ask yourself that question every single time you're dating somebody or even have a crush on them. Oh, well, if I can't marry this guy, then I can't have a crush on him. Like, what's the point, Or
Right.
like, in my case, I was queer, but I didn't really know what to do with it because I didn't have anywhere to put it in my like lexicon of how to be a person. I just had no idea. And so I didn't really pursue that part of my life for a long time. But I think that's also a part of it too, is like, oh, what is my deal with that? Like, do I like feel romantically attracted to women? Am I just sexually attracted? Like, I didn't know until I knew. And then I was like, oh, I did
Right.
fall in love with a woman. Like, weird. Okay, cool. Like that's
Yeah.
fun. So
Yeah.
yeah, be curious. Like it's cool
Yeah.
because you're more than you think you are. And like we don't give ourselves a lot of time and space to do this kind of introspection when it's really an important part of our lives. Like our romantic relationships tend to be the relationships that take up the most of our time and mental and emotional and physical capacity in our adult lives. Not all the time, but a lot of times.
Right.
And so I think it is important for us to give ourselves the space to consider that stuff.
And I think that they just have larger impacts. For example, what we're modeling about even how to navigate situations that we don't like, we're modeling it to children,
Yeah.
Like, I think, for example, if I'm saying my sexuality, my gender, my relationship style, my attraction, what my body says is not important and needs to be shut down and tamed, then I'm also saying that's true for other women too. Women should be tamed
Mhm.
and we should not have voices in politics and society. Maybe our health care doesn't matter. Maybe,
Why would we want bodily autonomy? It makes sense.
and I think that microcosm of the larger whole matters because I think if I'm saying what I want and what is correct for me matters, I'm also saying it matters for the next person. Like their
Mhm.
safety, their autonomy
Yeah.
matters. Like we as a collective need to care for each other and honor each other instead of trying to buy each other and tame each other.
Yes, and stuff each
Yeah.
other into tiny boxes so that
Yeah.
we're compatible and like compliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of why this is scary. It is because it goes outside of the cultural norms of what you should be doing. Like,
Quote
you should be
unquote.
working. You should be raising your
Yeah.
children all the time. You should be giving your energy to someone else 100% of the time. That's not true, but it is sort of how we generally tend to structure our lives. And so being able to invest the energy and time into considering how you want to feel in your
Yeah.
body in connection with other people, even on your own, like that is actually defiant.
Yeah.
So let's be a little more rebellious and like actually take the space and time we need to become whole unto ourselves and to feel all of the feelings that we're here to feel, because life is
Because you
about living it.
you heal yourself, you heal the community
Yeah.
too, I think, and
Right.
it's
Your
energy.
freedom is my freedom. I mean, we all
Yeah,
setting ourselves free in these different ways allow for more collective liberation. And
yeah,
like, again, like becoming too big for the system to grip
yeah,
allows you to start to actually shift the system itself because it can't survive if enough people won't be tamed by it anymore. And
yeah,
honestly, I think for me, like the work of where the individual meets the system is always where I found myself in my career. This like liminal space between individual people and systems. It is where I always work. And so with sexology and the work of helping individual people connect in with their own identity and their own embodied experience like that is such a powerful way for people to experience self-determination. And the
yeah,
work that I've always done is about helping people get to a place of they can be self-determined. That's what I care about. And so
yeah,
when I'm doing this work, it's different because it is on that like individual body level, but that also is, I think, the most powerful way to impact that liminal space between the individual and systems. If we can
yeah,
reclaim our own bodies that have been colonized by patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism and all of that, like we actually then do set ourselves free and create a different template for what happens next. And we have been given a lot of scripts and a lot of ways that things are supposed to be, and those are hard to overcome. Like I see them as like wagon ruts on a trail, and it's hard to get out of a rut. But like when we decide that I don't have to live by the scripts that I was handed, they're not real for me. I don't need to be a person who gets married one time to one cisgendered man and then I'm with that person forever no matter how much I like or hate it. Like, that's not how I'm going to be. I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to do relationships in a different way because that's what feels right to me in my life and allows me to flourish. That's creating a new path off of that old path. And the more that we get out of those ruts, the less power those ruts have for all of humanity. But that is how
Yeah.
mythology, can also help us to set ourselves free.
Yeah. And I kind of think you hear a lot of people say, why isn't Congress doing anything? If I was in Congress, I would do more. Why aren't people in the head of corporations taking care of their workers? Why aren't insurance companies uh, paying healthcare bills? And I think at the same time, we're like, I couldn't have that conversation with my spouse. I couldn't have that conversation with my partner. I couldn't have that conversation with my parents. And it's all connected. We have to be able to have the uncomfortable conversations with ourselves, with the people around us, and
Yeah.
then also hold people in charge accountable based
Mm-hmm.
on us also doing that uncomfortable work. But when
Yeah.
we're not willing to make the uncomfortable step of knowing what we want and what is right for us, I think we're participating in the larger system. Okay, so you were going to talk about relationships too.
The relationship style, the R part of GSR, right? So relationship style it's pretty, again, it's another color wheel of options. There's monogamy. That's a default style that we're all supposed to do and want. That's the goal, is like one perfect monogamous relationship. Once again, usually heterosexual because that's what our culture has said. But even not that, like even within same gender or multiple whatever situations, we do generally still tend to default to monogamy. That I think is important for us to also look at. Like, is monogamy the only option that works for me? For me, no. For me, no. Does not work for me. There are lots of people it can work for, and it's okay to be monogamous, and it's okay to be polyamorous, and it's okay for me to say that, and harder for all of us to feel that safety in our own bodies and in our own realities. And I say that including myself. I've known for a long time now that I'm polyamorous. Like, I've probably known at least for like 10 or 11 years that that's the case, and really started to integrate that part of myself and allow it. But I also was still in another long-term monogamous relationship in between now and then for 7 of those years. And so really, like, giving myself the space to actually practice the polyamorous nature I have is important. That said, I also am saying I am polyamorous. Like, it's an identity, it's a part of my orientation. I don't know that it is always an orientation for everybody. I think that sometimes it's a relationship style that you can do that may or may not be really connected to the way that you are all the time. So I think, yeah, this is a part of it. It's basically monogamy or some form of non-monogamy there's a smorgasbord of options here. I think it's also valuable because when we are talking about relationships, we're usually talking about the relationships of that we have with people we're having sex with. And it's not just those relationships that are important. I think this is also where we get into relationship anarchy, which I'm going to just say, like, don't freak out, because anarchy doesn't mean chaos, and it doesn't mean mayhem, and it doesn't mean there's no agreements, there's nothing holding us. It just means an absence of hierarchy, period, the end. That's all anarchy means. So relationship anarchy says, instead of having a natural, quote unquote, hierarchy of relationships that are like the person that I'm having sex with is the top, and then everyone else comes below that, or like maybe my kids are at the top and then that person, like whatever the deal is, we generally have kind of a default waterfall system of how and who gets dibs on our time and our attention. So relationship anarchy essentially is just saying, okay, I actually am sovereign and my relationships are important to me, and I might choose to have a lot of time and availability for my friend over here, Meredith, because we do different things together and like share work together, and we're both interested in some of the same things. So we spend a lot of time together, and not necessarily just with my partner, who I am having sex with, that I spend with my time with.
Right.
There are many different relationships that are important to me and available to all of us, when we only default to the person I'm having sex with is the most important. And basically, it's the big rock. Have you ever heard of like, you have big rocks and tiny rocks, and never mind. It's like a sermon illustration.
Uh,
You have to put the big rocks in first, then the medium
first,
rocks, then the
yeah,
little
yeah,
rocks, and then
yeah.
otherwise it won't fit because
So
it
that
all sits on top of each other. Yeah,
I'm
stuff goes in
familiar.
between.
Yeah,
You get it?
yeah,
But yeah, the only big rock that you have is your sexual relationship. That is not how it has to be. You can choose that. That's fine. But
right.
it also doesn't have to be that. So I think that's another place in here is like, what is your relationship style? How do you relate to a romantic partner or partners? And what do you feel like feels good for you in that, and how you want to structure your life? And also, I think the relationship anarchy side of it coming in to say, again, recognizing your own sovereignty and the sovereignty of your partners. Like
Yeah,
my partner now plays softball in the summer. Like it's his favorite thing in the world. And he's in 3 different teams, and he does tournaments sometimes. So he's really busy with it. Like that's great that his rocks are include softball and his different
yeah,
softball teams. Like
yeah,
that's not my scene. It's fine. I'll go sometimes. Like it's fun, but it's
yeah,
not for me. It's great. Like totally cool. That's another thing. It's like, how do you make space for the things that you really care about and you love, and also be in relationship with people who want to see you do those things? Because even
yeah,
if they're not like, I'm there all the time, it's nice for them to have it. And it's fun to see people you love do stuff. It's like compersion for their other activities. Compersion
yeah,
being the joy and delight and love you find in seeing someone you love be loved by someone else and love someone else. In this case, I'm talking about it in relationship to activities, but
yeah.
that also counts.
Being loved by softball. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I think that's a big space where people's relationship with rejection comes up, is watching their partners have interest
Hmm.
and what that means about you yourself, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what we designated as normal interests versus extra interests, and how that relates to each person's self-worth. I'm just thinking of an example of, I think that it's pretty common for people to say, "Oh, my partner's work is their priority,"
Hmm.
and we're fine with that.
Yeah.
I think when it becomes my partner's best friend is their priority, then we have a little bit more trouble. And then I think once you get to my partner's other sexual partner is a priority, that's where
Hmm.
people can have a really strong rejection reaction to things that's not
Yeah.
necessarily related to their own needs, but is
Right.
more related to what they think is normal. That there's this idea of what is normal. And if I was worthwhile, I would be treated in a quote unquote normal way. Does that,
Totally. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes. It does make sense. And I think part of it is like, we do, I just think it's important for us to recognize like, there's a huge range of what's normal in sex and in relationships.
yes,
Normal just means usually people act in a whatever way. It's kind of an imaginary thing. People
it
don't
is.
really know that. Like, it's just, what do you think is acceptable socially? That's what we think is normal. It's not.
Right.
Like, people have had different kinds of relationships. They just haven't been overt about it for a long
Or
time.
they
Like,
have.
yeah, or
Like
they
thousands
have.
of years ago, it was
Yeah.
totally normal to have
Yeah.
multiple partners, not just for men either, for
Right.
all genders. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it is a cultural construct that we're putting on
Yeah.
ourselves and judging our own individual desires and behavior on, and even putting our own emotional experience
Yeah.
through another kaleidoscope of other people's judgments and opinions that we're just guessing about. It is the thing that I just recently wrote about, energetic astigmatism, the idea that like you are projecting a part of yourself, a hologram of yourself in the world that is part of you. It is you. But underneath that is like a lot of also you. But the
Yeah.
kaleidoscope is what we put ourselves through to be like, hey, this is what I think you expect and what is acceptable and what will make me safe and loved and okay in the world. And all these other things about me are secret and hidden. Like when I'm in youth group and I'm like, oh, only boys masturbate? Like, you better never tell anyone. That's a thing. Uh-oh. Like those are the places and the pieces of ourselves that we cut off because we think they're bad, and then we hide them from ourselves and only find them later, and it's all like gross and rotten. Like we don't need to
Uh,
do that. It's okay, integrate your
yeah.
shadow, be friends with all of the parts of yourself, even the parts of yourself that seem really scary and not quote normal. Like it is not normal quote unquote, for me to be a person who went to Christian college and got a ministry degree and then kept getting engaged all the time. But I always was just hoping that all of my friends and lovers could live together on a compound forever. Like, what is more polyamorous than that? I
Yeah.
mean, I've always
Yeah.
had multiple people I call my best friend. Oh, it's my best friend Katie. It's my best friend Faye. It's like my best friend Amy. All of the friends are my best friend. Not all of them, but the good ones.
Yeah.
But I think that again is like, oh, well, maybe this is normal for me. Maybe this is just who I am and who I have been in my life. And I just want it to be like this. And what if
Yeah.
wanting something to be a way is fine? It's
Yeah.
fine. And if you're feeling like it's not normal because you're not getting attention that you want, like you want a different kind of attention. So, how do you
Yeah.
communicate about that? How do you ask for that from your partner? Or how do you give it to yourself? Or how do you find other relationships that can help fulfill those things that you're not getting in your primary partnership or from, whoever it is that you're hoping to get it from?
And one of the things I was thinking that I think is important about having outside support about this topic is I think it can be trickier than it seems to separate out what is my need that's not being met or what is my boundary that's being crossed from what do I think culturally what box do I think I'm supposed to fit into
Yeah.
culturally, right? I think that
Yeah.
that sounds simple, but it's tougher to untangle, and you do have to do some work to figure it
Yeah.
out, and I think it's worthwhile work. The other component that I'm kind of curious about that I've heard people talk about within gender sexuality relationship is the level of importance that any of it has to each individual person. That is
Mhm.
also a spectrum. And that's my experience with gender. I identify as a cis woman, and also I identify as the cultural expectations around that not being super critical to me or important to me.
Yeah.
So I don't find it necessary to make my body conform to extreme feminine look while I
Hmm.
still also identify as a woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think it is how do you sort of even recognizing the influence that these systems and expectations have on us is a process in itself, to step back and be like, oh, purity culture, weird. I never think about that. How is that actually affecting my life? Like it does. Actually, it does. And I think a lot of the ethos behind purity culture is also found in our like puritanical work ethic that we think is like the standard for people to be. The idea that pleasure has to be deferred until you've earned it or worked hard enough. Like it's
Yeah.
only for people who have leisure because they're hustling, or whatever
Yeah.
it is. Like you've got to feed the kids and put away the laundry before you can enjoy anything. Like
Yeah.
that's okay if that's what you need, but it's also not real life. And so if you're always deferring yourself after everything else, then you're gonna like maybe you shouldn't be surprised when you don't want to really be intimate with yourself. You're not like spending time with yourself. You maybe don't feel intimate with yourself because you don't even know yourself that well. Like I think that's a
Yeah.
real situation that people have. Like we think we know ourselves, but maybe you know a past version of yourself. Maybe you know only the projected version of yourself that you're living out in the world and not seeing the parts of you that are actually under the surface that are kind of running the whole show. That's part of the
Yeah.
work too, is like going in to kind of reclaim yourself. I mean, a lot of the
Yeah.
challenges we have are from abandoning ourselves. We don't know we're doing it, but we're leaving ourselves behind in places that are hidden or unsafe or otherwise, a way that we don't have to look at it. But it's still us.
Yeah. And I think that it really speaks to, I think, what is such an important point that if we want to have the relationships and the sex that we want, we actually have to go inward and know what we want. You have
Yeah.
to know what it is before you can create it. And I think that we dream of a scenario where we walk into the ice cream shop and there's the perfect person there and they tell us what we want. I read hundreds of romance novels. I love romance novels. I read so many romance novels. And one of the dreams of the romance novel is not having to know what you want and go get it, but just having it come to you and having it. I read a lot of heteronormative romance novels, and it's always the woman has the man come to her and be like, I know what you want, and it's this. And she's, no, no, no. Okay, you're right. I do see myself and my value because now you've shown it to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is the dream, that we don't have to identify what we want before we go get it. And I kind of get that dream, but it doesn't result in a good reality. And then there's the counter dream where the man is just driven, fighting warrior, businessman, billionaire, whatever he is. And then the woman comes in and shows him he didn't realize that what he really needed was an emotionally intimate life as well. It's a good thing
Mm.
she showed up, but it doesn't work to have. I call this the Lana Turner effect, because Lana Turner was this Hollywood actress who, the legend was, she walked into an ice cream shop and was discovered by a director who said, you should be a star. And that's every Hollywood story mimics that story,
Yeah.
which is probably a lie. I don't even think, I think she had a stage mom
Hmm.
who was promoting her, was the actual story.
Like
And
most of the starlets of the time. Yes.
yeah, Eyes on the Prize Kid, Eyes on the Prize was, I think, the actual story.
Yeah.
So, but I get why we have resistance to stopping and finding out what we want, because it's so much more vulnerable than just complying with the system and then having someone swoop in and tell us what we want.
Yeah. And then be like, I guess it's what I want. I'll get
Yeah,
married to you. Said
you
me
found
multiple
out.
times to different fiancés in college. Like it, I wasn't looking at you, but I guess if you're looking at me, it seems like something maybe
Yeah,
God wants. But that's a challenge of agency too, because it is like
yeah,
it. You're right. It isn't always easy to look under the surface and be like, okay, like then what? Who am I really? Then who do I want to be? How do I want my life to feel? It's sometimes it is scary. What if we don't get it? But to
yeah,
me, it's scarier to never try. It's scarier to just go, okay, this is my fate. I'm going to resign myself to it. Like, I just feel like for me, if I'm not living my life while I'm here, then I'm missing the point of being alive. And
yeah,
part of it is to allow this weird animal creature being of Sarai Johnson to exist as her full expression here on the earth. And
yeah,
that is scary. And I am weird and I am different than I thought I was supposed to be. And I still sometimes, a lot of the time, I'm like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could just be a heterosexual, monogamous person? Like, it'd be so great if I could just conform in that way. Like, my life would probably feel easier. I wouldn't be disappointing people as much, probably, you know? But
which
what's
is
the
also
point?
not true, I'll say, as a
Right.
heterosexual monogamous person.
Right.
I
Yeah.
I'm not doing better. So,
Right. Right. Exactly. So, like, what's the
yeah.
point of just always thinking that it's not okay to be you? Like, we have to be okay to
Yeah.
be us, and knowing who that is really important. And I am
Yeah.
glad. Like, actually, if I didn't know that I was polyamorous, I'd be much more confused about the choices I've made in my
Right.
relationships in particular. I'd be like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? I don't even understand this, but okay. And understanding that about myself has helped me clarify it. Like, I
Yeah.
do love many people at once, oftentimes. Sometimes I still love people from that I knew 20 years ago, and I still love them. And I would, if I saw them right now, I would love them. It's just that that's okay. That's allowed. It's allowed for me to feel that way about people, and it's allowed for me to express my love to people how it works consensually with them and with my other agreements with people. Like that is allowed. I'm allowed to be here. And again, I really do think that trust between with yourself, trust with another person, and like being safe enough to allow pleasure and sensation is the key, the real key to good, healthy sex and sexuality, which is why I talk about it in this way, like why I approach it in this way It's not like, oh, all you have to do is have some techniques. Here's all you have to do is use these different dilators. All you have to do is put this, thing in your vagina and walk around it and it'll like tone it and then you'll have better orgasms. Like that, all of those tools are great and are true. In all reality, performance in sexuality is only a part of it. The real truth is the experience of it is what matters, because the experience of it is transcendent and also the most human thing ever. And like being extremely present and attuned to your own body, and in a lot of cases to the body and essence of another person with you, is a truly peak human experience. And I would like more people to have that, because it is life giving and healing. And it sounds cheesy to say that. Like my sister actually recently was like, I used to just think it was cheesy that you were like, oh, sex is super healing. And now I get it, because, oh, oh, yeah, it is. And it is true. It can be, even if you have trauma, if you have religious trauma, if you have sexual trauma, like these are things that can be healed. It doesn't mean you
In a
have to.
safe way.
In a
Yeah, and
safe
in a safe
way.
way, not in
Right.
a, "You need to go have an orgy that feels
No,
unsafe to you, so
no,
heal
no. Healing
yourself."
isn't
Yeah,
dangerous. I mean, healing isn't
yeah,
about like suffering or putting yourself in a bad position. Healing is about,
yeah,
again, like being with yourself and learning to
yeah,
heal and regulate your nervous system. And part of why doing this work with a guide or a coach is important is because you do experience the co-regulation of interaction with another person, and also the safety and container of what, you co-create with that person. So if you want
yeah,
support and help from a sex coach, sexologist, sex therapist, whatever, that is a really good, valuable relationship to have, and it's specialized. And so it is really specific
yeah,
in this one area of your life, but it does impact all the rest of your life, I think. I mean, for me, it does.
yeah,
And for me,
yeah,
it's addressing the like core sacral wound. For me, that wound is it's not okay to feel. Like I'm not
mhm,
allowed to have my own emotions or express my emotions. That was not safe to do as a little kid. And in a way, like a lot of the rest of our lives after we're raised, we're spending our time unwinding the things that we were taught or that were impressed upon us. And that wound of it's not okay for me to feel also impacts it. If you can't feel, you don't know what you want. If you don't know
mhm,
what you want, you can't make choices. And that
mhm,
all cascades through your life, and it makes all the
mhm,
rest of your life harder and lopsided. And it makes a lot of
mhm,
sense that we have different symptoms or we burn out like
mhm,
majorly. Like these are a lot of things that can happen to us if we aren't paying attention to what our body is telling us, and reconnecting in with that is really essential. And I do it
mhm.
through sexology, and part of it is because I do think it's important to be really explicit about it. Like it
Yeah,
is about sex, and it isn't just because sex is about performance or even orgasms. It's because being a person, there's sexuality involved in that. Like let's make
mhm.
some space for the things that all really make us human.
So it seems like a couple check-in points for people for if sexology is right for them is if they know they have wounding around purity culture or rape culture, like that would be an obvious one
Mm-hmm.
that can create a barrier to attuning into knowing what you want,
Yeah.
like allowing pleasure in your body. It sounds like to me another one, but tell me what you think about this is if you have an idea that there's a normal way or a normal amount of sex, you might
Mm-hmm.
also have that wounding, but not have it be as explicit. What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
I think so for sure. I mean, like I felt like when I was married and I was trying to initiate sex, I was lucky if we would have sex once a month, but it felt weird to me because I'm like, I'm not supposed to be the one that wants to have sex all the time. Like, what's
Mhm.
wrong with me? What's wrong with
Mhm.
him? Like, nothing necessarily. It's just that, again, we just weren't sexually compatible. So, whoopsies. Yeah.
I mean, and that's another one that I was gonna say, if you are feeling pressured to have sex and you don't want to, but you're putting pressure on yourself to figure out why you don't want to, that's another check-in point. Or if you're wanting to have more sex and you're not having it and you're not sure why, but obviously there's a lot of can be embarrassment about that, but that's another check-in point where this can be really helpful. And then the other one that you had mentioned is if the conversations aren't working, like intimate conversations, agreements about relationship, and sex conversations.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah, for
that's
sure. All
one
of
way.
those. Yep.
Yeah.
I also think if you find yourself kind of repeating the same patterns in relationships, like I've had a lot of relationships where I get through them and I'm like, this is the same thing as the last time. What is happening? It's
Yeah.
weird, but it is us reenacting different patterns. And so, really kind of
Mhm.
wanting to unravel what those are is also a part of the
Yeah.
equation. I
Yeah.
think, yeah. Yeah. And I also think if you feel numb or disconnected
Mhm.
or burned out, like I mean burned out is honestly like a big one. A lot of times we're burned out partly because we're repressing our desire, partly and all the time because we're repressing the information our body is giving us and not and overriding it at the expense of our well-being. And so being burned out is I think another indicator that perhaps this area of your life could be handled differently and
Mhm.
perhaps could use some cultivation, because I think that if you're thinking about the whole system, your whole energetic system, that sacral place of erotic energy and creativity is really generative. And I think a way that you can start to sort of rekindle all of the fires that keep the rest of your
Mhm.
chakras all going and moving forward and like continuing their spin. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think those are all really good options or times to check in and say, hey, wonder if this is something that I actually want to work on now.
Yeah, and another one that came up for me is I a lot of times see people say, "I don't know what I want, but I don't like this." That's
Yes.
another kinda
Yeah,
check-in point, I think.
totally. Yep.
Yeah, similar to what you're saying. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanna make sure people know about?
I mean, there's so many different things to know about, but we'll have other episodes and we'll talk about them even more. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that if you want to feel better in your body and in your relationships, if you're exploring your sexual orientation, you're finding out like, oh, I might have a different orientation than I thought, or oh, I would like to meet somebody and like have a nice relationship. But I'm not sure where to start or whatever it
Yeah.
is, like, yeah, there is help for you and people are available to support you in that. And yeah,
And you're
call
one of
me.
them. So,
I'm
if
one of
people
them.
wanna work with you, what should their next step be?
Go to my website, saraijohnson.com. There's a desire map quiz you can take there, but you can also sign up for a discovery call with me if you're wanting to just chat about like where you are and where you would like to go. Let's just talk and figure it out, because there's lots of different ways to get started and a lot of different ways that we can work together. But I would love to just hear from you what you're going through and what you would like to have happen instead of where you are, if you know that. And if you don't know yet, then I love to help you discover that.
Yay, awesome.
Meredith, what is if people want to know about their astrology and human design? Because that is also a piece of this on the know yourself side of it, on the building self trust. That's a tool that I use. So, for everyone that actually does coaching with me, Meredith is my consulting astrologer. And so we will use those tools. But if they are like, I just want to get straight to it, let's go astrology and human design, how would they do that with you?
Yeah, they can just go to fourthcupastrology.com. And one of the ways that I encounter it is, I think, in terms of honoring people's uniqueness, not just with sexuality, but in connecting to their magic, their gifts. I encounter it through the human design energy centers and astrology, but I have a quiz on my website that is about unblocking your magic. And that's really adjacent to what we're talking about, even though it does encounter it differently than the sexology component. I think it is a really important distinction to make. And I think everybody's kind of different in what feels comfortable in the way to encounter knowing what you want, knowing what's magical about you,
Mm-hmm.
honoring the weirdness of your unique human self.
Mm-hmm.
I think both are great, but I think if somebody is really in that space where they are not sure what they want, wanting to explore their sexual orientation, like you said, date people, have more sex, communicate wanting to have less sex, those kind of things, I think it's appropriate to go to you for.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yay.
All right.
We did
Let's
it.
all enjoy ourselves a little more.
Yeah.